Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to make a bar graph on Excel and a line graph. I'll also show you how to make a caption. So let me go ahead and delete all of this information so we can start over. Anytime you want to delete anything on Excel, all you have to do is click on the entire figure. Make sure that these arrows that you see, like you see a cross with arrows, are present. So that way the whole thing is highlighted and all you have to do is press delete and the information is gone. I'm also going to delete this section here just to show you how to put this together. This is a data set that I found regarding the weather in San Diego. And this is actually this week's weather or this week's weather forecast in San Diego versus New York. And the temperature is in Fahrenheit. And so I want to make a bar graph representing the average weather of San Diego versus the average weather of New York. In order for me to do that, I need to take the average first. The way that I do that is by making a new section in which I can put the information in. I just find this to be a lot easier to make a bar graph if I separate a section for it. I click on the cell in which I want to do the calculation. And the way that I utilize Excel to do the calculation for me is by pressing the equal sign. So I'll start off by pressing equal, and then I'll look for the function. And so I want an average. I'll start off by spelling out average. And so I just press A, V, and as you can see, average shows up. So I can go ahead and click it. Now I have to specify what I want the average of. I highlight the cells of interest. Then I press enter at this point. So I'm going to press return or enter. And the average is calculated for me. If I drag this to the right, and so notice how you see a cross sign, not like the plus sign that's in white, but the cross or the plus that's in black, lets you know that you can drag it. And so I'm going to drag it over to the right side so that I can get the average calculation done for me automatically. So if you notice, the average here is from cells C7 to C13. And it did this for me automatically just by dragging it. Oops. Let me try this again here. So let me drag it over, and there you go. Now, in order for me to set the decimal points, so if I want it set to the tenths or the hundreds or the thousandths, then I highlight all of the areas of interest, and I go ahead and press on these sections here where it says increase decimal or decrease decimal. And so if I want to decrease a decimal, I click on it and I can get rid of the tenths place. If I want to add the tenths place, then I click on the other one where it says increase decimal, and I can add the hundredths or the thousandths. So I'll leave it at the tenths place in this case. Now I'm going to calculate the standard deviation. Let me start off with the equal sign. I'll look for standard deviation. STDEV is the function that I want to use. Click on it, highlight the area of interest, press enter, and the standard deviation is done for me. Now all I have to do is drag it to the right. And now it's done for both sections. The last thing that I want to do is the standard error. The standard error is done manually, and so I can't look for it. This is something that I have to memorize. The standard error is the standard deviation divided by the square root of the sample size. And so I start off with the equal sign, click on standard deviation. Then I'll use the division sign. So it's the slash here for division. I want to enclose everything that's under the fraction. And so I'll put in a parentheses. I'll type in square root, click on square root. Let's see what my sample size is. And so Monday through Sunday is a sample size of 7. So that is my sample size. Then I'll close everything that's under the fraction by putting 2 parentheses, press enter, and the standard error bar is, or the standard error, excuse me, is calculated for me. And so I'll drag it over, and now I have all of my calculations here. A bar graph is a representation of the average of 2 or more data sets. So in this case, I want to make a bar graph of the average temperatures of San Diego versus New York. And so all I have to do is highlight the area of interest. Notice how I'm not highlighting the standard deviation or the standard error, but I'll let you know how to include it in the bar graph itself. And in the bar graph, I'm actually only going to include the standard error, but I needed the standard deviation in order for me to calculate the standard error. So that's why I added it as well in the calculations, but I'm not going to add it in the final graph. So now that I have all of the areas of interest highlighted, I'm going to go ahead and make a bar graph. I'll press insert. I'll look for the pictures that have different types of graphs. I'll click on the one that looks like bars, and I'll pick the first one. So this is my bar graph. Some things that I like to do is remove the top title. We don't need one. In this case, and for our class, all titles are in the captions. So they not go on top. And I know we've learned like in high school that titles should be at the top, but this is not the case. When it comes to writing a lab report, and when it comes to even publishing a report on a journal, you never see titles at the top. They're always in the captions. So let me go ahead and remove it. I also like to remove the lines, even though it's not necessary, but the grid lines is something that I don't personally care for. So once I highlight all of them, I go ahead and press delete. I get rid of it. If you want to change the colors of the bars, since these are 2 different cities, so they're representing 2 different things, 2 different data sets, I can go ahead and click on one of the bars. Notice here that both bars are highlighted. I don't want both highlighted, I just want one, and that's the one that I'm going to change color. So I just make sure that I click it enough times until only one is highlighted. Once that is done, I go ahead and click on the button that looks like a paint bucket, and I change the color. And so I can change the color to purple. And now I have a new color on there. I'm going to add the standard error bars. So these are the bars that will go on top here. And the way that I do that is by clicking both bars. They're going to be done at the same time. And I'm going to click on the add chart element. I'll look for the error bar function and then drag it over until I find the button that says more error bar options. I click on more error bar options. Then I look for the button that says custom, and I specify the value. And so you always want to specify the value. I know that the error bars may be done for you automatically, but that's not the error bars that we'll be using. And so never use that in class. Always use the ones that you've calculated yourself. And so in this case, the standard error is in order. So notice that San Diego is the first bar and New York is the second bar. So all I have to do is just manually put in the numbers. Here, let me try to move this. Well, since I can't, let me cancel. Let me drag this down. I'll do this over again and make sure both bars are highlighted. Add chart element, error bars, more error bar options, custom, specify value. And now what I want to do is add the values 1.4 and 2.7 side by side. In some cases, some people just click on the actual cells themselves, and that's sufficient to be able to add the error bars, but I've always noticed issues with that. And so I like to manually type it in. The first number is 1.4. Let me go ahead and manually type in 1.4. The second one is 2.7. Without any spaces, I press the comma and add 2.7. And I'm done with the top set. So I highlight it, copy it, and put it on the bottom. And now that I'm done with both sets, I press OK. And now I have custom error bars. So these are the standard error bars for both. I noticed that the standard error bar for New York is bigger than San Diego, and that's what we have here. This is what we've calculated. And if you notice that there's a bigger error bar, that's because the numbers in the data set are much more farther apart. They're farther apart to the average. So notice that the average here is 36, and most of these numbers are not too close to 36, although they are pretty close. But we'll talk about standard deviation and standard error in class, like what they mean specifically, but for now, just know how to do them. The one thing that I'm missing here are my X and Y axis. In this case, I'm only going to add a Y axis since the X axis speaks for itself. I have San Diego here and New York. I think that's sufficient. And so the way that I add an axis is by highlighting on the whole area of the chart. And I press on let me just so I double clicked it to make sure that it's highlighted, okay? And you also wanna make sure that this shows up. So now that I double clicked it and the whole thing is highlighted, I press add chart element. And I add the axis titles. So I want to add the vertical. I'll change the vertical to temperature in Fahrenheit. So let me change that. And now my chart is complete. The last thing that I'm missing is a caption. The caption describes what is going on with the graph. And so instead of having a title at the top, I'm going to go ahead and add a caption at the bottom. The way that I do that is by inserting a text box. So I click on the text box and I add it here. And so I just go ahead and add the text box. In this case, this is my first figure, so I'll go ahead and call it figure 1. Figure 1. Let's see, so how can we describe this? We can say this is the average weekly temperature in Fahrenheit. You want to be as descriptive as possible. The average weekly temperature in Fahrenheit of San Diego versus or in comparison to New York. The one thing that I also want to add is the information on my error bars. We don't want to leave people assuming what the error bars mean. It's better just to inform your audience. And so I'll also mention that the error bars represent the standard error. I could have also added the standard deviation. That would have been fine too. But in this case, I added the standard error, and I also want you to always add the standard error when we make graphs in class. Now I'm going to quickly show you how to make a line graph. A line graph shows every single data point. So in this case, I'll need all of these data points. All I have to do is highlight this whole data set, press insert, click on the line. And so this right here is a scatter plot. And this one right here is a line. So I click on the line. I'll click on the first one. And notice here that every single data point is plotted, including every single day of the week. And so this gives you more information about the breakdown of what happens day per day in the differences of temperature. And so this gives you a little bit more information about the weekly temperature. And so I can adjust all of the components on here too by deleting the chart, deleting the background. I can even adjust the numbers here. And so you just double click on it and you can adjust the numbers by playing around with axis options. Okay, so you can just play around with the number size. I can't quite remember how to do it at the moment, but just play around with it until you figure it out. Oh, here it is. So there's minimum, maximum. So I can change like the maximum to, let's say 100. If I wanted to stretch out this graph. Okay, so notice how I stretched it out a little. And I can add an axis title. So I just double click on it. I can add an axis title. I'll add a vertical. Okay. And you'll also want to add a caption. And so this can be figure 2. And the information is still the same. Okay. But this is just a line graph here. And so this is just the basics on how to make a bar graph and a line graph. Go ahead and practice with this data set here. I'll give you a copy of this data set on your homework, and make these bar graphs and line graphs as I'm showing them here. Go ahead and practice and make sure that you take notes as you practice, since this is something that you'll do often in class. Also, if you notice that you don't have all of the functionality that I have, for example, if you're not able to put in the error bars, or you're not able to find some of the functions, I guarantee you it's because you are using the online version of Excel and not the downloaded version. It is very important for you to download Office 365 into your computer and then open the app from your computer. Do not use the online version. If you use the online version, you'll always have issues. You won't be able to use all of the functions, and you won't be able to complete this assignment. So make sure you download Office 365 to your computer. All right, that is the end of how to make a bar graph and a line graph.